Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Recently, you guys really liked the starter base video I did, where I did 5 unique houses that you could use for your starter base, or at least provided some inspiration for them. So I really wanted to try and do it again, but with some new designs and some more unique ideas that can help you with any Minecraft starter bases you've got. So I came up with 5 more designs that are all very different from my last, but I hope they can help provide you some inspiration for your own starter bases in Minecraft worlds. Now again, as a disclaimer, like I said in the last video, these bases aren't necessarily quick and easy to make. However, I made sure all of the materials are easily gatherable by basically stone tools. I kind of used the rule of if you can't gather it with stone tools and it's not easily harvested or findable in early game Minecraft, then I can't really use it. So with that being said, let's get into the 5 Minecraft base designs. So let's get into it. So here is the next starter base idea. As you can see, we were kind of going for like a beehive type idea. It's very like an eco-modern idea as much as we can, obviously with wood. But I was trying to go for something a lot more natural and still with that funky shape because again, we want some unique designs. I had quite a few reference images and basic ideas I found that I was looking at while I was trying to build this. And one of the struggles I had was trying to make this look balanced. So I think I did a fairly good job by especially putting the tree up the top here and then some supports and stilts on this side, which I think kind of help balance it out. But we've got a bunch of these little like circle or cylindrical spots that all have a different room. And I haven't done the interior yet, but again, I think this is going to be a bit of an interesting one to do the interior. I haven't even made stairs. I've kind of connected some of the spots. Oh, we got a missing piece. But yeah, there's like a lot more space, but it's very strange. So I don't know how I'm going to do it properly, but you know, love a challenge. Blocks I used in here are the birch wood and some dripstone, some oak planks, but honestly, you can interchange these blocks with a lot of different ones. I just thought these ones went together and I like the slight differences of each circle to kind of puzzle it together. There is a lot of glass, but again, glass is not too bad to get in early game, and I made sure all of it is glass panes as well. But if you don't have glass, you can leave a lot of them empty. I left this top one empty as a bit of an idea, and I even added a little balcony on this one with just some oak fences, because I wanted to give you guys some different ideas you could use should you choose to try a design like this for a starter base. This space I built in a plains biome. I think this is a plains biome. Yeah, right next to a bit of a forest, but I think a plains works the best for this. Maybe a meadow biome even could work. But in terms of trying to gather materials and where it would fit best, I think those ideas are probably the best biomes you could use. Now I did think as well while I was building, like some honeycomb or honey blocks every so often would be a really cool addition, just to pop out some yellow and stick towards that beehive idea that, you know, this is a bit inspired by. We did a very small amount of terraining. I said at the start it was a bit of an eco-modern build, so we've got a very flat and straight path as well as some very basic nature, with most of the bushy nature being actually on the build. And I just imagine like making a whole town or even a massive base, like just continuing with this idea, just going bigger and bigger and bigger, just having a massive like amalgamation of different cylinders just all stuck together. I think that could be really cool. But yeah, that's about all I've got to say for this build, so let's move on to the next one. Let's go. So this house right here was a really interesting one because honestly I don't know what the architecture style would be called. I got inspired by an architectural picture I saw on Pinterest, which I just really liked the warm pink coloured windows with the smooth bouldery like white architecture or structure. It just really stood out in the landscape. Now I wanted to do this in a flower forest for the reason that the pink windows and just basic greenery and flowers around the sides would help this kind of stand out or also make sense in a weird way. So the white really stands out against the background of the flower forest, but because of the pink it blends in slightly with the little patches of flowers we've got all around the front. Plus it's in the flower forest because we have got a bit of birch wood used in here. It's just a bit of a white block that you can easily gather in early game Minecraft. And of course, flower forest has a lot of birch trees. So because we wanted to use some white blocks, I had to gather some strange ones because there's not a lot of white blocks you can gather early game, or especially because I wanted to make these biome specific. So of course you can gather calcite pretty easily, but if you're in a flower forest, it's not likely you're going to have calcite anywhere nearby unless you have another biome like a mountain or snowy biome I think has it sometimes. But if you're just in a flower forest with nothing else nearby, the only white block that you can realistically get in large quantities is diorite. And that's of course because you can go down in the caves and look, we can find some diorite patch right there. And one diorite patch, maybe two, would fill up the whole house. Now I put some birch wood and some wool just scattered here and there, and that's not just for texturing's sake, which of course it does work for texturing, but it's mostly because sometimes you'll find yourself with just some odd white blocks here and there, and that could be of course birch wood, or even if you run out of diorite, then you can just mine a birch tree nearby. Or maybe you have a bunch of white wool just laying around here and there from sheep you killed to get some food. So I just put those as options where you can just add them in here and there sparingly to keep up the white block palette whilst it's still being pretty easy to gather. Now I did say I wanted to build this in the flower forest because the greenery really helps it make sense, or at least in my opinion, but the other reason is because we have these pink stained glass, we can get glass pretty easily because, I mean, we can see any water or river or beach nearby, you can just smelt some sand and it's pretty easy to do. But pink dye can be a bit harder. So in a flower forest, we've got loads of pink flowers that for some reason are just not in view, but you can get pink tulips and peonies, which are really easy ways for you to get the pink dye that you need to make the windows. Now inside, we haven't done the interior just yet, but inside I had to try and still make sure there's enough space for you to be able to move around. And again, once I do the interior properly, I'm hoping to make sure I fit everything you need in the starter base, just like I did in the last video. But we also want to make it look nice. So I've put some strict oak woods to just hover around the windows because we do have them indented slightly, just to give it a bit of depth. So by putting the little oak pillars, it just makes things look cleaner. And we've got a small staircase which leads upstairs, and the reason why I haven't quite put anything here is I'm thinking about how I can do the interior, and maybe I could add some furnaces or barrels, even chests, because you can open them through glass. Anyway, it'll be super interesting seeing what I can fit in this small space, but we'll see what we can do. But yeah, I really loved this house. We added a little bit of overgrownness with some vines, which you can gather from the jungle biomes, and although they don't spawn at least often on trees, I think they sometimes spawn on the sides of trees. The vines aren't necessary, but they do look cool just to add, and just to help with a little bit more of the overgrownness. The other good thing about this base is unlike some of the other bases we've done, which are a bit hidden in sight, this one is very contrasting and stands out quite a lot, and you can see it when you're traveling home from night and need to go find your base. It's just a big white boulder in the middle of the field, which looks pretty cool. I added a small path with some stone. I just thought it was a nice little touch, but overall this base was super simple to make, and it was kind of fun because I just got to add little bits jutting out here and there and make them smooth out a bit with the stairs. And how I made this smooth effect, it's obviously not perfect because Minecraft's very hard to get curves, but I just put a lot of the stairs around any of the more right angles, and I tried to make the stairs go and turn inwards just like these, so the corner stairs, because I think they do help slightly. Maybe it's just my opinion. But regardless, I think this house is a pretty cool design and it was really fun to build. Also a very easy idea for anyone to try, and even it could be really cool to try with some different contrasting elements. Even if you tried to do a grey house with the orange windows, or maybe a granite house with green windows, I think there's some really cool elements you could play with the simple shape and colour idea. But yeah, a very fun and easy to build house that you can gather in early game Minecraft. So let's move on to the next one. So here is our desert build. So I went for a kind of like a lush oasis style. This build is a lot bigger than some of the other ones we've done for starter bases, but the reason being is I used a lot of just sand in it and kind of mixed it in with some sandstone. And because of that, I mean, if you're in a desert, you got a very, very big abundance of sand, which is perfect, and it's what allowed us to make a bit of a bigger build while still being realistic to a starter base design. So this is like an oasis desert temple. We've got this cool like pool or water feature right in the middle. I did one of my favorite things, which is grab all of the polished stone types and put them in a kind of random pattern, because it just looks like washed up stones at the bottom of a river, and it fit pretty nice. We haven't got a proper roof because I wanted to go for like a viney idea. And I know this probably isn't the best with phantoms, but you know, I play survival Minecraft, at least myself, with them off often. And I mean, if you don't have it off, I guess this house will just encourage you to sleep. Now we've got this little greenhouse type area, which I think is just a really nice spot where you can look around and you can see we've got this lovely desert temple right over there. And it's just a cool spot where you can just, I don't know, see the vastness of the desert. We've got some cool designs just with the sandstone and sand pillars all around. And this would be kind of the main area where you would put your gear. So your furnaces and chests is what I imagine would go here. And I'll try it out when I do the interior. And then up here could be really anything else. I used oak wood because I still needed trees, and it actually inspired me around here because for the lucky reason, I guess, we are directly above a massive lush cave, as you can see. And because of that, we've got loads of like azalea trees just scattered around, which makes the whole desert look very lush. And there was even more azalea trees that I got rid of just to make this house. And that did show me that you can get trees in desert. Like if you were just playing Minecraft and only desert, you would still be able to get some trees just by the azaleas, which, you know, pretty easy to get underground. Now I wanted to use the green leaves, and because we've only got azaleas, we were only able to use the green azalea leaves, but they look really perfect in the desert biome. I think all the other leaves are very kind of browned and yellowed. Don't really look super cool in the desert biome, but the azalea ones stay green. I also made sure to add some cactuses just around, and we've got some rooted dirt and just path blocks to add a bit of texture around the area to make it look a little bit, I don't know, more fitting. It's also to show, you know, people would be walking around and treading on the sand, and I guess the sand wouldn't necessarily make dirt, but we'll just say that it works anyway. And usually in these areas I talk about the hardest parts of the build, and with this build it wasn't actually too difficult. However, the hardest part of this build was right at the end when I went to record this bit that I'm recording right now, because I built this pretty far off of my spawn and where I build everything else. And I didn't save the cohorts, so I had to spend a whole lot of time just scouring this massive desert to try and find this build, just so I could record this little section. I've saved the cohorts now, but that was the hardest part. I had to put my poor little laptop to 80 chunks just to find it. But yeah, anyway, the main blocks we used were of course sand and sandstone. Very easy to get early game Minecraft. We've got the azalea and the oak wood, and these are pretty dependent on you finding a lush cave, as well as the tuff here, which I guess you don't have to find in a lush cave, but it's often spawned there. So if you find a lush cave, you'll grab a lot of the materials you would need for a build like this. A little bit of stone, cobblestone, gravel, very easy to get in the desert, so those are not too awful together. And if you're really unable to find any tuff, you could use any number of blocks. You could use any stone blocks you would want. Just stone on its own I think would work just as well. I just like the tuff because it's slightly warmer than stone, but normal stone or cobblestone would work fine as well in the build. But yeah, this was a very fun build to do, and I loved the little desert theme, and I hope it's unique enough. Desert builds were kind of hard to find some very unique inspiration because they all have a very similar style, but tried my best. So I hope you enjoyed the build. Let's go on to the next one. So this starter base idea is probably my favourite out of all the ones we've got, and it's of course a lighthouse. I had to try and make this lighthouse in not the conventional red and white colours just because of the lack of materials. And I mean, we'll ignore the fact that there's a big red desert right next door, because this build is for, I think this is the Stony Shore, and that's what this starter base design is based off. So if you were on a stony shore, I don't know what other biomes would be around. It could be a red desert just like this, but it could be really anything else. So because of that, I tried to just use the materials you could get in the stony shore. Now, that being said, we do have wood, and I also am aware that it doesn't spawn on the stony shore here, but if you take out the wood, it would still work, but you know, it adds just a little nice touch. And oak wood is the easiest wood to get. You could still get it in a lush cave with the azalea tree, so I guess it is still possible. But yeah, aside from that, all of these materials you'll be able to get from caving or from around the area. So the main blocks we used are the diorite, the dripstone, and the sandstone. Sandstone you can get from under the water, where all the sand will spawn. You can just make it, or maybe you'll be lucky enough to be able to craft it. And when there's a stony shore, there's usually beaches around, so you can kind of count on that to make sure you've got the ability to get some sandstone. And then diorite and dripstone will be in caves below the ground. So yeah, I love this build. It's just a very pale lighthouse. I think it looks super cool. And the dripstone, which is usually a pretty, well, I mean, stony color, really pops out the red or pinkish purpley tones just against the sandstone and diorite, which were the alternatives for the white, which, I mean, diorite is white, but to give it a little variations, we have those two lighter blocks to help contrast with the dripstone swirl. Now, I haven't done the interior, as with all of these, that will be for the end, I think this would be a really fun interior to do actually, because it's tall. It's going to be a bit of an interesting one to try. However, I did make sure to utilize some space by adding the little house down here which connects, and I need to add a little staircase because this is meant to be accessed from there and you can just walk around the lighthouse. Now up here we've also got a little bit of a walk around lookout area which is just very pretty. You can't walk through, which I'm very glad about. I thought you could walk through this little gap, but you can't, because if I added any iron bars here, it would block the walkway, and I want it to be accessible all the way around. There's no light in the lighthouse right now, it's just an empty shell, but it's a pretty cool starter base design, and I've always wanted to attempt a lighthouse build in a starter base idea, but it's not super easy just because of the blocks you would usually need, which is of course a very bright red color. But I think this pale lighthouse actually works super well. It's very moody. I think it just hits the spot. I really like it. But yeah, that's probably my favorite build. So with that being said, let's move to the very last starter base design. Let's go. So contrasting with my favorite design that I mentioned directly before, this one is probably my least favorite. And it's not because of the idea. I think the idea worked pretty well, but as I tried to build it and tried to execute the idea that I'd been seeing and was inspired by, I realized it was really hard to do with the limited amount of blocks that I had access to in this biome. Because of course I decided to build this in a snow biome, which does have a lot less access to resources than some other biomes, most particularly color. I think this design would have worked so much better if I had some colored stained glass like orange or something similar, or the ability to just make these branches like a white color. So maybe pale wood, maybe this would have worked better in a pale forest, but I'm not sure. Anyway, the main design I was trying to go for was this modern treehouse in a bit of a dead tree. So I still wanted the branches to look like it was holding it up and sticking out, and I think I did that fairly well, but for whatever reason, just the egg or whatever shape this would be right in the middle just didn't really hit, and I'm not too sure why. But I mean, that's the nature of building. Some things just don't work out, but I'll still share with you all of the builds that I try. So with the blocks for this one, I've used the spruce and deep slate and some basalt. Now basalt you can gather in geodes, you don't have to use the basalt. I did have it all originally in deep slate, but it really didn't work. I think the smooth basalt does help a lot, smoothing out the area. There was too much texture with the cobbled deep slate and it just didn't really fit correctly in my opinion, but it is still usable. Now we've got the little staircase up from down here with a little ladder as well, and I would have liked this to be in birch. Maybe in sand as well, or just a color that's a bit warmer, a bit more of like a beige. Like I think birch or sandstone would have worked nicely just to offset the coldness feeling that I get from this. I mean, it does bring a sense of atmosphere, but it's a bit more unsettling than the other builds that I have showed. And when I think of starter bases, I think a very cozy type of build, and this just doesn't really fit that for me. I mean, maybe it's someone's cup of tea, so you might see this and really like it, but for me it's just not quite what I wanted. And it sucks because I did spend quite a lot of time on this. However, I will still do the interior, as always, because I think this interior will still be a lot of fun because of the little branches that are poking out. Now, although I don't like the general house on top of the tree, I will tell you, I really love the tree. as I was building it and trying to make it so it could fit, I really liked the shape of the tree. The dead tree, just the look of it looked really cool. So I am happy with that quite a lot. Again, I think it would look better if I was able to variate some colors, but as I'm trying to deal with starter vases and make it so it's still accessible in a single biome, just so if you want to build it, you don't have to venture out too far to gather materials or resources, I could only use the spruce wood, which is very abundant. I did consider putting leaves on the tree, but I think that would take away from what I was trying to go for. And I think if I put leaves on it, it would make it a little bit worse in a way, a bit more messy. I think that although I don't like it, I think the atmosphere this build brings is still very eerie and a little unsettling, at least for me. I'm not really sure why. But if I added some green leaves, it would kind of offset that feeling and maybe make it look a little bit more confusing. So again, maybe you like this one, but maybe not. But anyway, sorry to finish on the least favorite builds. What a note to end on. But maybe you really liked this last build. So let me know. But with that being said, that was 5 starter base designs that you can do in your Minecraft world. Hopefully they were just as unique as the last ones, and hopefully they sparked some inspiration, creativity in your brain. And if you built any of these, or if they inspired you for anything, please let me know in the comments and share some screenshots in the Discord if you haven't joined that already. I have really been enjoying making these little starter base videos, but it has been very difficult to find some ideas. So if you have any, also please leave those ideas down and I will try my best to recreate them in Minecraft. But anyway, please let me know which one was your favorite, and I hope you enjoyed the video and the builds. I will leave the last section of the video just to the time lapse of the interiors for each house design, just to give you some inspiration. So feel free to stick around and enjoy the music for that. But all that being said, I sincerely hope you enjoyed the video and the builds, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.